Testing. There we go. Good evening. I am Toby DeBose. I'm a teacher here, like Mr. Halstead, and also pastor in the church. And we're glad you're here tonight. And I'm wondering if you've ever been walking around doing whatever you're doing, and as you go to place, you see somebody and you think, man, I know who that is, but something's off and I can't remember who they are because they're not wearing a uniform or they don't have the hat on that I'm used to seeing them in. I wonder who they are, and you just can't get it, who they are. You don't really recognize them, and it's embarrassing. I remember when I was 15 years old, I left home for the summer to go on a mission trip, and while I was gone for almost 3 months, I grew like 3 inches, and I was outside all summer and didn't get a haircut, and kept putting peroxide in my hair. So by the time I got home, my hair was long and blonde, and it looked like some beach rat, you know. And so I'm in the Jacksonville International Airport, I'm walking along, and my parents walk up to me and then step to one side and go around me. And I was like, Mom? And they looked at me and they're like, oh, we didn't even recognize you. Did that ever happen to you before? Failed to recognize somebody. I had been gone less than 3 months, and my family didn't even recognize me. Jesus went on a little trip to the cross and was gone for less than 3 days, and his friends and family didn't recognize him either. I want to take a look at that tonight. If you look at Luke chapter 24, a few verses, verse 13 through 17, I want you to notice 5 things about this passage of Scripture, and they all start with P. I want you to recognize our predicament, our plan, the proof, the problem, and the person. First of all, the predicament. Luke 24:13 says, now that same day 2 of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them, but they were kept from recognizing him. He asked them, what are you discussing together as you walk along? They stood still, and their faces were downcast. Notice that something had happened, and they didn't recognize Jesus. He walks up to them on the road, and they don't recognize him. I wonder, was he wearing some kind of disguise? Did they just have one of those moments like I have sometimes where I see somebody, they don't have their hat on, and I don't realize that they're the person from Starbucks. But for whatever reason, they don't recognize him. He says, hey, what are you guys talking about? And as soon as he does, immediately they do one of those. They're all depressed. They're all bummed out because the predicament that we're in is one of despair when we fail to recognize Jesus. I don't know if you guys listen to popular music or not, but a couple of years ago, maybe several years ago, there was this whiny pop song on the radio by Joan Osborne, What If God Was One of Us? You know, what if God was one of us? Just a slob like one of us. Just a stranger on a bus trying to get back home. And every time I would hear that, I would shout at the heavens and shake my fist at Joan Osborne and say, Joan, God was one of us. Jesus came like a slob, just like one of us. And failure to recognize him produces whiny pop songs because it's also very depressing. That's our predicament. But there's a plan. If you look at verse 18, it says, one of them, named Cleopas, asked him, are you the only visitor to Jerusalem who do not know these things that have happened there these days? What things? He asked. About Jesus of Nazareth, they replied. He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. The chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. And what is more, it's the 3rd day since all these things have happened. It's like a pity party. They're so bummed out. They're so desperately in despair. But there's a plan. They just can't understand the plan. So when Jesus himself comes up and says, hey, what's the problem? They say, don't you know? Don't you know what the problem is? And they think he's just a stranger. And then they answer back the question, well, who was this Jesus? And they give kind of the pop song version of who Jesus was. Oh, he was this powerful guy, you know. He did lots of miracles and everybody thought he was so impressive, but I don't know what happened. We thought he was going to be the guy that was going to like do it all and like really make something out of our country, but nothing happened. Nothing happened, and they crucified him. He's dead, and now it's the 3rd day, and you know, people don't get better after being dead for 3 days. So this is all just so bad. And we were hoping that he was the one. You see that? They were hoping. They didn't have hope anymore. They used to have it, now they don't have it. That's so depressing, isn't it? To lose your hope, to misplace your hope. You ever misplace your hope? That's a bad thing to misplace. You want to make sure you hold on to hope. I read this book several years ago that said that the promises of God are like faith handles. They're like handles that you can hold on to when you're weak so that God's presence comes to you. You know what I'm saying? The promises of God, the plan of God are like handles for your faith to grab a hold of. I don't know if you guys watch the news at all, but like something really cool happened this last week. There's this place out in California called Knott's Berry Farm, and they have like an amusement park, and it has this really cool ride on it called Windseeker. And we took a trip last year to Busch Gardens, and they have a roller coaster that's like 200 and some feet off the ground. This thing goes up to 302 feet in the air, and then spins people around in a circle at 30 miles an hour, dangling from a little piece of cable. Well, this thing went up in the air with 20 people on it in the middle of the afternoon, and it got stuck there for 3.5 hours at 300 feet up in the air. Okay? I don't know about you, but I don't want to be suspended in the air for 3.5 hours with nothing to hold on to but those little handles right there. I wouldn't feel very hopeful as I look down on the ants below that I'm going to get out of there. I'll get thirsty or need to use a facility or something, I don't know. But 3.5 hours, I would begin to think maybe my hope was a little misplaced in the engineering behind that machine. These guys had misplaced some hope too. They were in a crisis. And their crisis was they had to put hope in something other than God's plan. Have you put your hope in something other than God's plan? Don't do that, or you're likely to lose your hope. So there's a predicament, there's a plan, but there's some proof. You need some proof. In addition, some of our women amazed us. They went to the tomb early this morning, but didn't find his body. They came and told us they had seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Then some of our companions went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but him they did not see. The women confused us. I'm just going to let that sit. The women confused us. Maybe that's why these guys are so miserable. It's they don't know how to listen to their women. The women went down there and saw an empty tomb, empty grave, and came back and said, "Ah, good news, empty grave." And they went, "Huh." And then some other guys went down there and checked it out and came back and said, "They're right, empty grave." But these two dudes said, "Huh, this is all just so confusing, I'm going home." I don't know. That's what it says. The women confused them. They got confused. So they just went on home. So I got a principle from this I want you to know. Understanding comes after belief. You have to believe before you can understand. Before you can see the proof and know what it even means, you got to believe something. You got to believe somebody. You got to take somebody's word for it and say, maybe they're right. I don't know. Maybe they're right. And if they're right, what does the evidence mean? It very rarely works the other way around. Let me give you a couple of examples. A couple of years ago, we were fighting this war in Iraq, and one group of people said, war in Iraq's terrible tragedy, catastrophic disaster, whatever. Another group of people said, best war we've ever fought, unbelievable success. Here's another example. Global warming. One group of people on one side says, every time you drive a car, you're ruining the atmosphere. Global warming, the world's coming to an end, oh my. Another group of people on the other side says, there is no such thing as global warming. The whole world is cooler than it used to be. There is no global warming. I don't know. What does the evidence say? On the one hand, you've got Democrats who say President Obama is the Messiah. You've got Republicans on the other side that say he's the Antichrist. Which is it? I don't know. What does the evidence say? They all say the evidence says something else. What about the beginning of all things? Origins. Where did we come from? One group of people says, the evidence shows the Big Bang. The other group of people says, there was no Big Bang. God created. You know, I'm convinced that you could stick an evolutionist in a time machine and you could take them all the way back to the very beginning and put them in the garden and wherever, hover above the face of the water, and the first day God says, let there be light, and they would see the light explode into space. And Second day, third day, fourth day, see it all. Sixth day, God creates man. He takes dirt and breathes into it and becomes a living soul. And then you bring him back forward in time and say, hey, what'd you see? And the evolutionists go, it was amazing. It was an amazing demonstration of evolutionary scientists. Mud got up off the ground and suddenly took a breath and walked. You didn't see God? God, heavens no. Science, that's what I saw. Because you got to believe before you can understand the proof. You know what these disciples didn't believe? They didn't believe that a dead man could get up and walk. So it didn't matter how much proof there was. They didn't believe it. Do you believe proof about Jesus? We have a predicament, a plan, and proof. Fourth, we have a problem. Verse 25 says, he said to them, how foolish you are and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Did not the Christ have to suffer these things and then enter his glory? And beginning with Moses and the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself. Here's the problem. Slow of heart. Slow of heart. Slow of heart to believe. This is interesting. He says it was absolutely essential that the Christ, the Messiah, had to suffer. See, they could believe in like a guy coming on a white horse and like glory and all that. But suffering? What? No, that's not cool. Suffering? No. We get a lot of suffering. We don't want any more of the suffering stuff. We want a guy that comes and he like puts it all together, has all of his problems figured out. We don't need the suffering Messiah. We need another kind of Messiah. We don't need the one the prophets talk about. We don't even understand that guy. But we need a guy that can come and kick Rome out of our country. That's what we need, is strong leader type guy. But not that guy. Not the guy that died on a cross. That doesn't compute with us. It's interesting to me that what Jesus didn't do with these guys who knew him, didn't understand him or recognize him. What he didn't do is what I would do, which is take people on a field trip and say, you didn't understand? Come on, come with me. Let me show you something. And take them up to Golgotha and say, see, he's not here. Take them down in the tomb and say, see, not here, not here. See, there's a sheep, not here. Stone rolled away. Angels, ooh, he's not here. Where could he be? I don't know. And then I would go, ooh, what do you think this is? And show him scars on his wrist and like hole in his side, holes in his feet. Do I remind you of anybody, fellas, that you might have spent 3.5 years of your life with? A little proof, a little object lesson, something like that. But that's not what he did. He didn't show them more proof because they didn't believe the proof. What he showed them was the Scripture. He showed them the Bible. In the Bible, in the Old Testament, there's this slang term for the people who came from Pharaoh, the Israelites, when they were let go, that God was constantly saying, you're a stiff-necked group of people. I loved that when I was a kid. They would say that about them, stiff-necked, because I always saw that thing, you wear on your neck whenever you hurt your neck, Mrs. Keith had one on for a little while, that stiff-neck thing, so you can't turn your head, stiff-necked. It's a word picture for being stubborn. I'm not saying Mrs. Keith is stubborn, because the Lord knows she's not stubborn. Soft heart, very easy. But no, they're stiff-necked. It's like, God's over there and he's screaming, hey, come over here. And they're like, oh, I'm not turning my head. No. Stiff-necked, But we don't talk like that. When I moved to Jacksonville, there's another word that was used on the radio, and I had no idea what they were saying. I would be going to work, and they would say, avoid downtown, avoid the I-10-95 split or merger because rubberneckers are clogging it up due to an accident. And we're like, rubberneckers? What the world's a rubbernecker? What does that even mean? Is that like some kind of a tire in the road? I don't understand rubbernecker. I don't get that until, of course, I became one of the rubberneckers and I was driving and stopped, and 45 minutes later, I get up there to see, what in the world? Is somebody dead, bleeding? Is there, a bomb went off and the road's no more? Because it's taking a long time to get where I'm going. And you get there, and when you get there, it's like some guy changing a tire. You're like, what? But everybody's got to go and look to see, rubbernecker, look over there. It slows everybody down. I can't stand that. I'm like, I feel gypped. I wanted to see some catastrophe. I wanted to see an accident.